Hey everybody, how's it going? Everybody hear me okay? Let's get some lights going on here. All right. Got to make it look pretty. Jimmy, good to see you. Oh, you guys have a thing that says anniversary follower. That's weird. We've been doing this for a lot more than a year. But you guys are anniversary followers. Oh, and it says, oh, 5 year. Wow. So Misty is a 5-year anniversary follower. She's been following the Oak Park page for 5 years. And it says Jimmy's been following for 1 year. Cheryl's got a 5-year. How fancy. Anyway. As I said, Jimmy, good to see you. Misty, good to see you again. Cynthia Crane from Murfreesboro, Arkansas. Glad to have you. Cheryl's with us this evening. Got off work a little bit earlier than normal, I guess. Sue from St. Joe Mo is with us. Luana Ashton Weber Funk, good eve to you as well. Janice, how are you? Kimberly says, and enjoying it every time. Dorothy Collier and Jack are with us. Hey, Jennifer, how are you this evening? I'm doing okay, Janice. Thank you for asking. Tonight's going to be an interesting study. Tonight's going to be one of those nights where we're going to have to really talk about how we read the Old Testament. I mean, we've been talking about that the whole time, but tonight it's really going to be driven home. Yeah, I like the mornings. It just gets too hot. When it gets up to 74 or 80 like today, that's too hot. It's 75 right now. I don't like that. I really don't like this time of year in Texas where you have to run the heater in the morning and the air conditioner in the evening. I'm ready for, I call it hockey jersey weather. Hey, Ben, good evening to you. Good to see you. Does your feed show like everybody's like badges above their name, and is it all in foreign languages?
Some are English.
That is so weird. Yeah, I really have to. I just don't like it when it's cold in the morning. Cheryl kind of likes it around 70 at night, and that's a little cold for me, so I'm okay with it in bed with the sheets on, but when I wake up, I'll usually turn the heater on to get it up to 71 or 72. The furnace. I mean, it's been getting down into the 40s. Let's see what the 7-day forecast looks like. Oh my gosh. See, this is horrible. 85 on Wednesday, 86 on Thursday, 88 on Saturday. See, we just dipped back into summer. We were in fall for a week, and now we're back in summer. No more furnace for us for the next week, sweetheart. It's gone, Janice. It was here for 3 days and now it's gone. Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that, Jennifer. I think it really does make people sick. I've had a rough couple days. I think a fairly unpleasant reaction to probably my pneumonia shot, or maybe getting both the flu shot and pneumonia shot at the same time. Nothing horrible, but last night I woke up in the middle of the night with a muscle cramp on one of my larger muscles on the left side of my body, and I got my pneumonia shot on my right like upper arm, and it hurts bad. So I couldn't sleep on my left or my right side, so I kept sleeping on my back and snoring. Fall is in the pumpkins. Yeah, I think this was. I'll drink pickle juice. I don't mind it. I drank it a lot when I played sports in high school, college, but I think this had to be related to the shots. I don't think it was a legitimate low sodium response. Jennifer says, hey, Grandma. So I assume that Susan's. Oh, there she is. Yeah, Susan Sutherland is with us. I missed her coming in. Cynthia says she got her booster. That's good. Hopefully. Luana had a really bad reaction to her booster, but she's better now. No luck in the nursery. I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. I guess I'll try a paid Facebook ad targeted to people in Temple. I tried Nextdoor, and that usually is better when you're targeting local people, but I'm still working on it. COVID booster and a flu shot together. Yeah, I heard some people have been doing that. Does your Facebook feed keep showing a little thing that says it's trying to connect? Mine keeps doing that. I don't know why. Our bandwidth should be crazy good. And I'm on, yeah, 800 megabytes per second, megabits per second. I guess 800 megabytes per second would be pretty impressive. Upload speed is 900 megabits per second. I don't know. Should be fine. 7:08. We will get started here in a couple of minutes. Let me pop over to YouTube. Got some folks watching. Nobody said anything, but good to see you. I'm going to go ahead and pop this on so I don't forget. You guys can see exactly what my pores look like. At least my huge zit that I had there a couple weeks ago is fading away. Let me go to Nextdoor. Let me just repost this. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this real fast. Go over here, post a message, event. Okay. What if I do a message and for, no, visible to nearby neighborhoods? Maybe that'll be a little bit better. Ask a neighbor. Do that. Add my picture. There we go. All right. I have reposted again on Nextdoor. And I'll tell you what, real fast. Oh, I want to actually delete this first one. Delete. Delete. Let's go on Facebook and do the same thing. Go back over here. See more. Go up here. Take that. Add that. Add my picture. All right, it's back on Facebook. And I may post that on our church page and promote it as a paid advertisement and target it for people. But if you all can, here, I'm going to post this over on our church page real fast. If I could just figure out how to post it. I just want to post something. Let me post something. Boy, they make this difficult. Newsfeed. Create a post. And go back here. I know it seems dumb to do this right now, but at least this way I know it gets done. Let's go over here. I can't post while media is uploading. Okay. So there is a post about our nursery workers. Again, I put one before, but there's one on the Oak Park page. I'll drop a link. And if you guys could share that, that would be helpful. Except for, I think, Facebook. Yeah, it showed the one from a month ago when I did it. I don't know. Go check out our page and see if you can share it. I think it just did something really weird, like make it a job. There we go. Let me undo the job thing. I don't know why they have to make it so difficult. Okay, well, I give up. If you see the post pop up on the Facebook page, share it. Is that it? That's it. But it took off my picture. Edit post. Add picture. People look at stuff more if it has a picture. Okay. Now I can drop a link. There we go. Yeah, Facebook changes every other week. I don't think you can actually share on YouTube, but anyway, if y'all can go to that and share it, then maybe more people will see it. Yeah, I could put it on the sign. We've got some other plans for the sign right now. But it might come to that. It's a good idea, Janice. Derek, good to see you. Kim, glad you're with us. Yeah, we've had people in and out a lot at the pumpkin patch. It's very popular. So hopefully a lot of people will, well, let's be realistic. Hopefully one or two people will think that maybe it would be cool to come join us on Sunday morning. I mean, if 50 of them do, that's fine. Anyway, we're 7:15. We are gonna get going. Yeah, the lights on the arboretum out there are very helpful. Okay, we are 5 minutes late. I apologize. Just wanted to take care of that while I was thinking about it. So we're looking at Genesis chapter. Sorry, I was reading ahead. Chapter 20? Yeah. Genesis chapter 20. And like I said, this is really going to make us, I mean, I'm already there, but this is going to make everybody really stop and think about how you read the Old Testament. You know, generally speaking, I think I was thinking earlier, I thought there were three and maybe I came up with a fourth, but there's at least three ways to read the Old Testament. The first is to read it as if, and I guess I'm saying there's three appropriate ways to read it. I don't know. Let me keep talking and I'll decide whether it's appropriate or not. An appropriate way to read it, at least I'm not going to tell you it's inappropriate, is that it's there. It is the word of God, and it's on the page, and it's exactly right, and it's what you see is what you get, and you don't have to interpret it. It just means what it means, and if it meant what it meant back 6,000 to 12,000 years ago, it means the same thing today. Nothing's changed. That's everything that it says happened literally exactly the way that it happened, and we need to deal with that. That's one way that I would not. It's so hard for me to just capitulate and say that that's okay. I would not criticize. I don't know. That's one way to do it. Okay. I personally think that to do it exactly like I just said is a little bit lazy and a little too easy. The second way would be, I think, a bit more appropriate, which is to still take it literally, but understand that the messages buried within it are difficult, are many, are close to impossible to understand, but with much work throughout your life, you could understand them. I think that's somewhat appropriate. Then there's the, more towards the way that I read it. Well, let's not get there yet. So the other way to read it would be that they're not literal, that it's just mythology, it's just story, and it doesn't accurately represent God, God's people, or anything. It's just what people thought about God all those years ago, and it's there just to show us how wrong it is. And I think that makes it useless. And so I definitely don't think that that's appropriate. And then there's the angle that I come in, where I don't necessarily think that it's literal, but I don't think it was written to be taken literally. So I don't think we're doing the books, the scrolls, the text. I don't think we're doing the text an injustice by not taking it literally, because I don't think it was ever written to be taken literally. I think it is mythology and etiologies and morality stories and and wisdom and a beautiful collection of all that was inspired by God. And I think that's probably the hardest way to read it, because it requires so much digging in and trying to understand and figuring out how to apply and figuring out why. And if you have to go a step further than you would normally do. Like, you might at one point, if you wanted to read critically, you might say, well, why did Abraham do this thing? And that is a question that we have to answer. But then there's a deeper question, which is, why did the author of this particular book say that Abraham did it this way? Because we don't even know if Abraham is a literal person. We don't know. There are no corroborating historical documents. There are some corroborating historical documents about events that happen when you get into later parts of the Old Testament, like First and Second Kings, for instance. And so some of that we can say, yeah, that at least is rooted in some kind of reality. We don't know that the story of Abraham isn't a mythology designed to show us sort of the prototypical ancestor of our faith, and not necessarily a literal person. So then we have to ask not only why would Abraham do this, but why would the person who wrote this say that Abraham did it? What was the lesson that they were trying to be taught? This is very complicated, very nuanced. But for me, it's the joy of reading the Old Testament. It's what makes me love it so much. And when we get to parts of today's story, and I mean, this is the very beginning of it. This gets much more mind-boggling. I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. You really have to start thinking about what you believe about biblical authority, particularly in the Old Testament. I've said this many times. When we get to the New Testament, I take all that very literally, with an understanding that no two people who saw something happen actually saw the same thing happen. And when they write it down, no two people ever say the same thing happened. So recognizing that, the stories that were told to the two disciples of the four Gospels who were actually there, and then the two people who weren't there but heard stories, that's all just different perspectives. So Luke says something different from Matthew, who says something different from John, who says something different from Mark. That's just normal. That's just people being people. Anyway, I've talked about all this, but today it's really going to come to the forefront. Today we get a spotlight on this. And I just came back over to the page and saw that Ben said, good thing you got a spotlight on the patch. Well, today we have a spotlight on the scripture, and we're really going to have to think about what this chapter means. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. So let's get going, okay? The last thing that we saw was that Lot's daughters got him drunk, and each of them had their father impregnate them, and they had children, and one founded Moab, and the other founded the Ammonites, and the Moabites and the Ammonites were sworn enemies to the Israelites by the time these stories would have spread. So Lot certainly was not portrayed well in his story. So now we have sort of a hearkening back to Genesis 12, I think it was, where Abraham tells the Pharaoh that Sarah, his wife, is actually his sister, and Pharaoh takes her in the biblical sense. And then God punishes the Pharaoh in Egypt for committing adultery, even though the Pharaoh had no idea that he was doing that. We didn't really talk about that. We didn't really talk about whether it was just or unjust, or whether we get to even say whether it was just or unjust, but whether it was whether we're okay with the fact that God punished Pharaoh for something that he didn't even know that he was doing wrong, when Abraham and Sarah are the ones who lied and committed the sin. And you can argue that Sarah had no agency of her own, that back then she was just Abraham's wife and she had to do whatever he said to. I don't know how successful you can be at arguing that, but you can argue that. But that just puts it all on Abraham, which is kind of where I've been going. And now we're going to have a very similar story. So Genesis chapter 20, verse 1. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the region of the Negeb and settled between Kadesh and Shur, while residing in Gerar as an alien. Okay, so, I mean, he's going to be an alien wherever he goes. He doesn't have his own land yet. He's supposed to get to the land eventually, but right now he's just supposed to wander. That's what God has asked him to do. While residing in Gerar as an alien, Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Now again, let's go back and we can look at two things here. Why is Abraham saying that his wife is his sister? And why is the author, the narrator of the story, telling us that Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister," when we know that that's actually partially true, because they share the same father, or at least so he says. It is very interesting when they talk about the genealogy and they talk about Abraham's father, and they list all of his children. They never mention Sarah, but nonetheless, we know why Abraham says it. We're going to find out explicitly here in a minute, but implicitly we know it's because he uses Sarah to make sure he's not in trouble. He gives her to other people to use sexually so that he won't be killed. And if you notice, that has been a fairly common theme, right? So Lot's daughters used Lot sexually so that their lineage wouldn't end. Lot offered his daughters to an entire town to rape so that they might not harm the angels who was there, probably because he knew that they had come to destroy Sodom and didn't want that to happen. Abraham offered his wife to the Pharaoh so that they would be treated well. So this is a very common theme in what we've read so far, is that people have been willing to offer other people up who evidently don't have their own agency in this situation. They're not capable of making their own decisions. They offer them up sexually for their own safety. It is a theme at this point. So Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister," and King Abimelech of Gerar sent and took Sarah. Now, I guess it's significant that it doesn't say he knew her. When the Old Testament says that a man knew a woman, that's the euphemism they were using for having sexual relations with. He simply took her. Okay? You almost have to read this thing twice. You can't just read it once. It's like a good mystery novel that reveals all the secrets at the end, and then you kind of want to go back and read the whole thing again, knowing what you learned at the end. So we assume at this point, we would assume that he took Sarah and that he knew her. That's what we would assume. 90-year-old hottie that she is. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night. Okay, God came to Abimelech. Now, this is really important because, again, we're not going to find this out until later, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Abimelech does not believe in the God of the Israelites. He does not know the God of the Israelites. That's not his religion. And yet God speaks to this outsider, this alien, this non-believer in a dream. Now, that is a little bit different. God, up to this point, has spoken to everyone else through the image of a human being. In this case, he comes in a dream. Perhaps the author makes this distinction because Abimelech is not a believer and he doesn't want to give him the same reward, same kind of treatment that the believers of God, the family of Israel, would receive. So God comes to Abimelech in a dream by night, and he said to him, "You are about to die." Yeah, that's exactly what this has been. Hopefully that's what I've gotten across. It is absolutely a safety factor. And the main problem with it being a safety factor is that Abraham doesn't trust God to protect him. And so instead, he offers up his wife for sexual favors for whoever wants her, as long as it may go well for him. He does not trust God. Okay. So what we don't know, again, this is all revealed at the end, but we don't know is that by this time, Abimelech is really sick. When God says you're about to die, he doesn't mean I'm going to strike you with a lightning bolt. He means you have been inflicted with a horrible disease, and this horrible disease is going to kill you because of the woman that you have taken. Now, it says taken, just like it said took before, but we're going to find out he didn't actually touch her. Again, I don't know. Maybe we should have started at verse 7 and read back to 1 instead of going 1 to 7. But here's what happens. You're about to die because of the woman whom you have taken. She's a married woman. He was known for his faith, but I believe he was known for his lack of faith. I believe that the authors who are telling Abraham's story are being very intentional to describe how unfaithful he really is. And, just in case you're not here the day that I reveal the whole thing, I mean, the whole point is that throughout the entirety of the Old Testament, God uses the most unfaithful people to do the most incredible things, which should give us all hope. I think I said last week, I saw a sign that said, God uses imperfect people because no other kind exist. So I think that a common theme in the Old Testament is that God uses kind of the worst of the worst, to be honest. That may be taking it too far, but he uses very unfaithful things to accomplish whatever God wants to accomplish. Ultimately, it's God's will that will be done. God did know that he did not take her because, Luana, as we continue on, Abimelech, who had not approached, now Abimelech had not approached her. He hadn't even approached her. This giving people as a wife, that in and of itself was the cultural norm, except for the norm was you didn't give up your own wife to pretend to be your sister to give to somebody else, but you would give one of your daughters. And that's how houses were united. A daughter would marry a son, and then those two houses would be at peace with each other and share whatever they wanted to share. And that's how alliances were built. That's how kingdoms were forged. That in and of itself, even though it sounds horrible to us, was the cultural norm at the time. Giving your own wife and saying that she's your sister is not the norm. But for some reason, Abimelech had never even approached her, so he didn't trust her, and God knew that he hadn't approached her because, we'll keep going, Abimelech says, Lord, will you destroy an innocent people? Where have we heard that before? Who else recently said, God, would you destroy innocent people? Oh, yeah, it's Abraham. When he was ostensibly just trying to save his cousin Lot and all of his, or his nephew Lot and all of his business partners in Sodom. Yeah, I'm thinking specifically, Kim, about the Abraham speech where he says, "Would you kill 50 righteous people, um, along with all the unrighteous people?" And God said, "No, if I find 50 righteous people, I won't do that." And Abraham says, "Well, let me just one more thing. If there were 40, would you do that?" And he gets all the way down to 10, and he stops. That's Abraham that does his whole used car spiel. But Abimelech actually has a real valid defense here. He says, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother.' I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands." I guess because he's giving him Luana asks if God knew he hadn't touched her, why did he tell him you are a dead man? He didn't say you are a dead man. He said you are about to die. So I guess you might say Abimelech had not approached her yet. Okay, it was going to happen at some point, because remember, Sarah's a hottie. So when he'd gotten around to it, actually, I'm going to give you a little bit more of the, like I said, this is all revealed later. Abimelech's illness is part of what probably kept him from being able to approach her. So God actually, in this story, afflicted Abimelech with some kind of disease so horrible that he couldn't even approach Sarah. And he did that not to punish him. Okay. The infliction of the disease wasn't to punish him. It was to save him. It was to keep it so he wouldn't approach her. Now you might say, why didn't God just step in right at the beginning and say, "Hey, that's, this is Abraham's wife. Don't do that." I mean, a better question is, why does Abraham keep lying about this stuff? And a half truth is a whole lie. So a lie of admission is often worse than an expressed lie. But let's keep going. We'll get there. So Abimelech is sick. God has just told him that you're about to die because you've taken a married woman. And he says, "What, would you destroy an innocent people?" He said, "She's my sister." She said, "He's my brother." I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands. Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me." And I think that's fair. The first thing you might think is, yeah, I mean, it is a sin against, well, I don't even know. The first thing you might think is that this is a sin against Abraham, right? Or this is a sin against Sarah. But since they're going along with it, it's not really any kind of trespass, right? They're not doing something. Abimelech wasn't going to do something he wasn't told that he could do. But ultimately, he was going to... Sorry, I was looking at a comment. Let me get back to this. It doesn't matter. The Hebrew here is really unclear, Luana. If your translation says you're a dead man, I mean, he's not a dead man. He doesn't die. So I think he's just saying, if that's what your translation says, I think the correct English interpretation of that is it was just a threat. I think the NRSV is probably more accurate here when it says you are about to die because of this woman you have taken. Okay, but again, let me go back to the future here and get into verse 6. God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. It was I who kept you from sinning against me." So the sin would have been against God. And so we have to ask a question. And that is, where does our culpability lie? I mean, Abraham is basically going to, when he explains this to Abimelech, he's going to say, "I knew that you were a godless people." But Abraham doesn't know that. He assumes that. I guess he thinks everybody's like Sodom. That's been his experience, but he doesn't know what these people are like. But if they were godless, whose fault is it that they were godless? We don't know. We don't know if they had been told the story. But see, at this point, it didn't matter, really, because it was just the Israelites. That's all that mattered. If you weren't an Israelite, it didn't matter. You weren't told the story of God and given the chance to believe it. It was you had to be part of the Israelites to be saved, to be part of the covenant. So it just didn't matter. If you weren't part of the Israelites, you were, by their definition at the time, godless, I guess. But Abimelech is going, he didn't sin against God because God inflicted him with this horrible disease that made it so that he could not touch Sarah. God gave him the disease to protect him. I mean, does it not strike you as horribly unfair? I mean, how do we read this in the 21st century or in the 20th century or any thing that we can imagine? At what point does this seem fair? Abimelech didn't even know that she was married. Now, there is a moral code, and this is actually part of sort of the ontological beliefs in the existence of God. It's a subdivision of that called the moral giver. So we all have a morality. We know from a very young age that it's not right to hit. It's not right to steal. If we do those things, we generally try to hide them because we know that we're not supposed to do it. We know it's not right to kill. We don't have to be told that. And I think we, in our hearts, know it's not right to sleep with a married woman or a married man. I don't think that we have to be Christians to understand that. I think there are plenty of moral atheists in the world who understand that adultery is not okay. This is not something that's unique to people who believe in God. So certainly I would hold Abimelech liable if he had slept with her knowing that she was Abraham's wife. But for one thing, he didn't even sleep with her. He didn't even touch her. And for another thing, he didn't know that she was his wife. So this is totally unfair. And Abraham is an absolute schmuck. I mean, he's the worst. Look at all the trouble he caused Pharaoh by lying. And then what happened when Pharaoh sent him on the way? He gave him a bunch of stuff. So Abraham gets rewarded for the lie, which makes it worse. And God allows that, which makes it inconceivable. But surely it's not going to happen again, right? It's going to happen again. God says, "Now then, return the man's wife, for he's a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you will surely die, you and all that are yours." Something that's interesting is the word prophet here is anachronistic. There were no prophets in these days. Abraham was not a prophet. Except that God says that he is. Or let's be very explicit here. The author of this chapter says that God says he was a prophet. By the time this was written down, there were prophets. But there were no prophets then. And Abraham wasn't a prophet. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was an honorific title, and it just made Abraham look like that much more of a almost as if the notion is that God was saying, yeah, you wouldn't really understand Abraham's ways. He had a reason for doing what he did. So just restore his wife, and everything will be okay. If you don't, not only are you going to die, but everything you love, everything that you possess is going to die. Let's keep going. Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all of his servants and told them all of these things. Yep, that's pretty much where we're headed, Ben. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us?" Again, you've got to think back to Genesis 12 when Pharaoh confronts Abraham. "How have I sinned against you that you've brought such great guilt on me and my kingdom?" So here he does not acknowledge that he sinned. He's saying, what did I do to you that you have brought this calamity upon me and my house? You have done things to me that ought not to be done. I love that Abimelech is assertive here. I love that he's assertive with God, and not in that creepy used car salesman way like Abraham does, where it's very self-serving, even though Abraham was going to be fine. But he says, with this, why would you kill innocent people? If you're this God that the Israelites talk about that's so wonderful, what kind of justice would there be in killing innocent people? And God's response is, oh, don't worry about it. I made you horribly sick so that you wouldn't actually touch her and sin against me. So it'll be fine. Just go to Abraham, apologize, give him back his wife, and then he'll pray for you. And once he prays for you, you'll be fine. I don't like it. How have I sinned against you that you have done things to me that ought not to be done? And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What were you thinking of that you did this thing?" Doesn't that sound like it should be something God would say constantly to Abraham? Abraham, what were you thinking? I told you I would protect you. What were you thinking? God should be saying constantly to Abraham, Abraham, what were you thinking? But God doesn't say that. Abraham said, hey, I did it because I thought there's no fear of God at all in this place, and they'll kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. By the way, when we get to like the book of, let me find it, Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 22, "Cursed be anyone who lies with his sister, whether the daughter of his father or the daughter of his mother, and all the people shall say amen." So this becomes a forbidden sin. But not when Abraham does it. Not until later. Besides, she's my sister, the daughter of my father, not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife, as half sisters often do. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, oh my gosh, we are right back in the Garden of Eden. That woman that you gave to me, she gave me the fruit and I ate from it. That serpent that you created, he lied to me and I ate the fruit. When God caused me to wander from my father's house, God made this happen. This is all God's fault. When God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, "This is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother." That's all, honey. If we ever go to a party and there's a bunch of really attractive women, will you just tell them you're my sister for me? No? Cheryl's not down for that. It's disgusting. And here it is, Ben. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored his wife Sarah to him. Abimelech said, "My land is before you. Settle where it pleases you." No longer an alien. And I love this. I really like Abimelech. Right now, anyway. I kind of forget what he does in the future, although he definitely comes back into the picture. But right now, I really like him because he says to Sarah, "Look, I've given your brother, not your husband. I've given your brother. I know what you've done. I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver." Judas gave up Jesus to the Romans for 30 pieces of silver. I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your exoneration before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. And this is the first place, like I said, you got to read it in reverse. This is the first place we actually know that Abimelech was even sick, because before, when God said, what does this translation say? Luana says you're a dead man. This says you're about to die, but we don't even know that he's sick until we get to the very end of this story. We find out that, well, I guess God had told Abimelech that Abraham would pray for him. And you shall live. Okay, so it still doesn't. Really, this is the first time we know that he's sick. And also, he made his wife and his female slaves infertile. And the most important thing, again, to anybody back in that period of time was your lineage continuing. The guy that wrote the commentary for this that I'm reading says that the Hebrew is very unclear, and when it says he also healed his wife, that it's conceivable that he's talking about Sarah, but I don't think so. I mean, this is just sort of this would get counted off in a paper because we're talking about Abraham and God and Abimelech. We know God doesn't have a wife, but Abraham and Abimelech both have a wife. So when they said healed his wife and female slaves, but it's in the Hebrew, I think I don't have the Hebrew. I don't want to say that. I think it's clear that it's Abimelech's wife and female slaves. So all because Abraham lied to Abimelech because he didn't want to get hurt, and gave him his wife to take as his own wife so that he wouldn't get hurt, God inflicted Abimelech with some horrible disease. and made his wife and all of his female slaves infertile. It says, it ends, for the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. I actually missed that when I read it this afternoon. So it's almost like God punished Abimelech for the sin that he was committing against Abraham, even though God said it's the sin you'd be committing against me, being God. But the women were punished for the thing that was going to happen to Sarah if Abimelech had actually known her. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Ben. The guy that wrote the commentary says that it's open to discussion. I'm guessing he's a lot smarter than I am, but I agree with you. I think, I mean, it says God had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech, so I think it's very clear. I think the commentary writer is way off there. Here's what we're going to do this week. See, Janice, I don't know. Janice says we have to let God be God even when we don't understand. Is that the lesson here? It is the lesson if we're going to read the Old Testament as being completely literal and absolutely correct in everything that it says and without needing interpretation. If that's the way that we read the Old Testament, then yes, the lesson is absolutely we have to let God be God even when we don't understand. But would you not find it difficult to worship a God who would destroy a man and his wife and his entire household for doing something he didn't even know was wrong, and then reward the man who lied that created the whole thing in the first place? So then we have to ask these two questions that I said we have to ask. On one level, we have to ask, why would well, we know why Abraham did this. It's very simple. He didn't trust God. He did not have faith in God. He did not trust God to protect him. So he took matters into his own hand. That's the common theme with Abraham is, hey, God, that's a good idea, but I've got a better idea and I'm going to do it my way. With Sarah too. Hey, God, that's a good idea, but I've got a better idea. I've got this maid, Hagar. She'll be great. She'll have a kid. Everything will be fine. Your idea is okay, but my idea is better. This is the common theme with both Abraham and Sarah. That, yeah, God, that's a good idea, but we've got a better idea. So we understand Abraham's motives. They're not complicated. So the question we really have to ask is, what is God's motive? This whole thing didn't have to happen. I mean, I know I see you saying he sees far into the future, and I think that is true. We talked about sort of the good guesser kind of thing, or you can just straight up believe in I mean, we are supposed to believe in the omnipotence of God. You can believe that everything's already written out and we don't really have free will, or we did have free will maybe, but now it's written down, and so now we don't change you can believe a different number of things that none of that's problematic in and of itself. That's just kind of worldview stuff that's okay. But none of this had to happen for the future. That this whole thing could have never have existed and it would have been fine. Abraham could have gone to Abimelech and say, hey, I'm an alien. I'm looking for a place to stay. I follow the God of Israel. This is my wife. We're both very pleased to meet you. Abimelech seems like a great guy. I mean, he would have taken care of him. It seems like, and then the story could have continued. So none of this had to happen, but it's here. So the question is, why did God allow all this? Why did God do this thing to Abimelech? Or we can go one step deeper and say, why did the author say that God did all this? Why did the author say that God did this to Abimelech? What is the lesson that is trying to be taught through this? And we're done for today because it's 8 o'clock. And so now that we know the story, next week we're going to come back to it. We're going to read the story again quickly to refresh our memories. Now, like I said, everything gets sort of revealed piece by piece by piece. It's like this great mystery novel that you don't get until the very end. So next week we'll know what the story is. We'll read it again, and then we'll talk about the interpretation. And it'll give you a week to think about it, because these are really deep questions that we have to examine. And they pertain, as I said, to biblical authority, how you read the Bible, what your understanding is of what the Old Testament is about, and all those things. God's not a big look, don't touch person, Ben. Jesus said, if you look upon a woman with lust, you have committed adultery in your heart. So I don't think it's a look, don't touch thing. My wife won't even let me get away with that. I'm not allowed to look. And I don't want to. So that's it for today, everybody. I love it too, Susan. It's so deep, and this is so complicated. And we're, Genesis 21, which we won't get to for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to be off on vacation for a week. But Genesis 21 is going to get into back to Sarah and Hagar. And how Sarah treats Hagar is just utterly reprehensible. It's awful. And then Abraham and Abimelech are going to make a covenant together. And then in the very next chapter, Genesis 22, Abraham is going to receive the command to sacrifice Isaac. And if you disagree with me about the stuff we've had so far, wait until you disagree with me about that. It's going to be exciting. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Really appreciate it. YouTube folks, thank you for being with us. Hope you enjoyed. Be sure to click on that link. I'll put it one more time into the Facebook chat. This is our post from the Oak Park page looking for a nursery worker. Make sure you go to that and share it with your friends. If you're in Temple, if you're not in Temple, it probably won't help a whole lot. But yeah, help us out with that. All right, everybody. So that's it for today. As always, God bless, Godspeed. If you're in town, be sure you stop by and check out the pumpkin patch. It's pretty awesome. Misty's, we had an awesome experience with getting the pumpkins set up. We were worried we wouldn't have enough people. I posted it on Nextdoor, and the community came together and helped us out. Had a ton of people out there. It was absolutely amazing. Anyway, Godspeed, God bless, and as always, thanks for watching.